How's everybody doing today?
How you doing?
I'm doing great too. Thanks for asking. Hey, I got this email this week, and I replied, and then he replied, and then I replied again, and then he replied again, and so this is just too good. This is just too good. So we're doing this series, on how God makes men, and I'm going to dedicate this morning's message to this guy. You'll see why. Pat, Jehovah's Witness versus Christianity. Thoughts and answers, question mark, question mark. That's all, like no porch, no, hey, I really appreciate your work, and I value your opinion, just like, okay. So my response, equally short, Jerry, this is really not my area. Sorry, Pat. All caps. You have got to be kidding me. Did you turn the light on? I cannot believe that you, a Christian leader and believer, can say that this is not my area. And you want people to be disciples and men of God? What do your disciples say when confronted by the false teachings of Jehovah's Witness? I just cannot believe that you have no response to this. My response, his name, what I should have said is, quote, I've not studied this area, and so I'm not qualified to respond. That said, I would like to hold you accountable to your tone, for your tone and attitude. That's really no way for Christian brothers to talk to each other. Respectfully, Pat. Response. My humble apology, Mr. Pat. I really thought that a person in your position and study could give me a good answer. My tone and attitude, oh, brother, that sounds like a kid on the playground. Get over it. Oh, okay. You gotta love it. So, hey, baby, this one's for you. This one's for you. Let's start with a shout out. We got a new group today. We want to welcome the Westwood Men's Group. The leader is William Bruce. They're in Dothan, Alabama at the Westwood Presbyterian Church. And they just started a weekly Bible study at William's house using the weekly Bible studies. So would you join me in giving the Westwood Men's Group a warm Man in the Mirror welcome? 1, 2, 3, hoorah! Welcome, guys. We're glad to have you with us. Again, the study is How God Makes Men. And so today, the title of the message, Moses, the Principle of Personal Transformation. A friend of mine, Rick, a couple of decades ago, felt God leading him, felt God saying to him, go and disciple young men who will in turn disciple others. Another friend of ours here at the Bible study a decade ago felt that God was leading him to go and start a used car automobile dealership. He wanted to do that to demonstrate Christian principles and generate funding for the kingdom of God. It's very interesting because Rick, my friend who felt led to go and disciple young men, went out and tried to do that, but he couldn't get any young men to do it with him. And then our friend who started the used car automobile dealership went really good, but then he had to close his business because of the Great Recession. And so there are these things that we sense that God is leading us to do, and then we go out to do them, and everything seems to fall apart. So maybe, for example, you felt led by God to invest in some special education to pursue a particular career. You did that, and now you can't find a position in that field. Or maybe you felt led by God to maybe start a small business, and you did that, and now it's Friday, and you have no idea how you're going to make payroll today. Or maybe you had a dream that you were going to be a cycle breaker, that you would have the perfect family and wife, but it's turning out to be so much harder than you thought it would. And you're beginning to wonder, God, was that really you, or did I just make this up in my imagination? And so the question that we want to take a look at today is, why would God lead you in this direction? And then put you in a position where you're either frustrated or even worse, you end up failing. And so in the Bible, we have, now we can't answer what's going on in every situation, but there is a powerful principle in the life of Moses that can help you and me understand why it is that we end up in these positions where we feel like God has led us to do something that's not turning out at all like we expected. And so we're going to begin this morning by looking at character college, the idea of character college. And so the problem is this, is that God has an agenda. And when we come to faith in God, we bring our agenda with us. And it takes a while to get on the same agenda. It just takes a while to get on the same agenda. So the big idea today is this: God makes men by taking us through a humbling process that fundamentally changes the way we think. God makes us by taking us through this humbling process that fundamentally changes the way we think. It gives us a new world view. He enrolls us. How? How does it happen? He enrolls us in character college so that we can open our eyes and change the way we think. And so we're going to look at the epic story this morning of Moses. And we're going to see how God uses our flawed efforts and our wilderness experiences to help change the way that we think. So we're going to look at the epic story of Moses. You want to be at Acts chapter 7. We're going to begin at verse 20. Acts chapter 7, verse 20. At the time Moses was born, he was no ordinary child. And I should add, too, that you're no ordinary child either. I don't think the idea in the Bible is that because he was no ordinary child, that means that there are ordinary children. Every child is knit together in its mother's womb and is special to God, okay? For 3 months, he was cared for in his father's house. He was placed outside. Pharaoh's daughter took him, brought him in, made him her own son. Moses was educated in all the wisdom of the Egyptians. He was powerful in speech and action. Verse 23, when Moses was 40 years old, he decided to go out and check on his Israelite brothers. And he saw 2 of them fighting with each other. Excuse me. He saw an Egyptian and an Israelite, easy for me to say, fighting together. And he ended up killing the Egyptian. The next day he went out and he saw 2 Israelites fighting with each other, and he went over to them and he said, "Brothers, why are you doing this? Why are you fighting with each other?" And one of them said, "What are you going to do? Are you going to kill me like you killed that Egyptian yesterday?" So Moses, the day before, he had murdered a man, and he became afraid for his life, and he fled into the Midianite wilderness. And in verse 30, it says, after 40 years had passed, an angel appeared to him in a burning bush. Now, let's just stop and pause and examine what's going on here in this story. So God gave Moses this vision that he would deliver his people from slavery. They've been crying out to God to rescue him. And in another verse, which we'll look at in a minute, it confirms that God had called Moses to be a deliverer. He had this vision that he was going to deliver his people, just like you've had a vision that you're going to be a cycle breaker in your family. Just like you've had a vision that you're going to start this business for the glory of God. Just like you've had this vision that you're going to go and disciple young men, and they're going to surround you and listen to your the wisdom of your years and pass it on to others. That's what was going on. And then Moses went out to do the thing that he was absolutely certain that God had called him to do, and he's driven into the wilderness for 40 years. So, one thing for you to think about is that when God gives you a vision, there may be some things that he wants to work into your life and some things that he wants to work out of your life before he actually sends you to do the thing. In other words, it's not necessarily true that the calling is immediately followed by the sending. In fact, I would suggest to you, because of the big idea for the day, that God is taking us through a humbling process that fundamentally changes the way we think, is that there is probably a time gap between when he calls you to do this thing and when you actually get sent to do it. In fact, I hope it's not 40 years, but it would not surprise me if for some of us that the gap between when he calls us to do the great thing that he wants us to do and then sends us to do the great thing that he wants us to do, that it would be decades. It would be decades. It certainly was for Moses. It certainly was for Moses. And so what was going on? What was going on? Well, there was just too much Moses in Moses, apparently. Now, in Numbers, it tells us that later on, Moses was the most humble man who ever lived. He was the most humble man on the entire earth. But at this point, when you have enough, what would be the right Jewish term? Chutzpah? What is it? Chutzpah. Got to go out and kill a guy because you're doing it, because God has given you this vision to deliver the people. That's not exactly a humble guy, waiting on the Lord, That's got to take him back into your own hands. So there was too much Moses in Moses. And God drove him into the wilderness to help him, to take him through character college. That's what he did. So now another issue out here is that we're out in this wilderness experience. You've had this sense that God has led you to do this thing, and now it doesn't seem like it's turning out at all like you thought it would, and you feel abandoned. Don't you feel abandoned? You feel abandoned by God. Man, listen to this. Watch this. Watch this. The feeling of abandonment is very similar to the feeling of equipping. When God is not abandoning you, he is equipping you. So when you have this feeling like you have been abandoned by God, understanding that you're still walking with him, he hasn't given up on you. He's not abandoning you. He's equipping you. It's a time of equipping. God was equipping Moses out in the wilderness so that he would have the capability to lead the people in the wilderness when he did eventually deliver them from the hand of Pharaoh in Egypt. They had to spend another 40 years in the wilderness. Moses was very equipped by then to do that work. So, it was a postgraduate course in character. So, you've come to Christ, you've been developing Christian character. Guess what? More education's on the way. More education is on the way. So, I want to say a word about a fallacy that I think is true in my life, and I think it's true in other people's lives as well. And it's the fallacy of our motives, thinking that our motives are pure. When we say that we want to go change the world, when you have this idea that you want to really go and make a difference, you really want to go and change the world, let me tell you, and I'm speaking from personal experience, is that in the early days of our spiritual maturity, we don't really want to go and change the world for the sake of changing the world. We really want, when we say that, what we really want is we want to change the world and make a difference because we want to be rewarded for it. We want to get something out of it. It's a very advanced stage of spiritual maturity when you can honestly say, I want to make a difference, but I want to do it because I'm a servant of God. I want to do it for his glory alone. And then let me tell you, even then, you never have pure motives. You never have pure motives. Oh, maybe on one day for 10 minutes, you might have pure motives. All right? But, okay, when we try to pursue success, we are always pursuing success for the right and the wrong reasons at the same time. We always have mixed motives. They're always jumbled up together. And so I tell my wife, I said, Patsy, I try to show my appreciation. Patsy, that was a fantastic dinner that you prepared every night that she prepares dinner, which is a couple nights a week. We do a lot of, just let's eat dinner on our own. We'll just each make our own dinner and then, have a little sandwich or something or go out to dinner. Sidebar. So when she makes dinner, I always make a point of just telling her how much I appreciate it. And there is a sense in which I'm trying to neighbor love her, just to upbuild her and sincerely and honestly bless her. But there's another piece to that too. I know that if I compliment her, she's going to work hard the next time to also make me a very nice dinner. All right? So no matter what you're doing, you always have these mixed motives. Paul said it. What did he say? He said, when I would do good, what did he say? Evil's right there with me. So he understood that. The flesh wars against the spirit, and the spirit against the flesh, so that you do not do what you want. They're always there. We always have these mixed motives. And so God takes us into the wilderness. He enrolls us in character college to help do two things. To number one, to help change us, to help transform us so that we really are, instead of doing things to get a reward in a worldly sense, we're really doing things in a sense to get a reward from a heavenly sense. And then also to keep cutting down, to keep pruning back the motives of the flesh in us. Look, suffering compels us to seek a God that success makes us think we don't need. Do you get that? Suffering will compel you to seek a God that success will make you think you don't really need. And so this humbling process, that's a big idea, that God makes us by taking us through a humbling process that just fundamentally alters and changes the way that we think. So another example. So I'm writing this book on this series, How God Makes Men. So I'm writing it for all the right reasons. I'm mainly writing it to be obedient to God because this is my vocation and what God has called me to do. And I believe that He led me to write this book. So obedience to God in response to His love for me, and because He loved me, my love for Him, I am seeking to be obedient to God. That's the number one motive. And that's way down the line in spiritual maturity, I admit it. But that's my motive. Secondly is the Great Commission, that I really and truly and earnestly want to make disciples. And I want to make as many disciples as possible. And so I say that the publisher wants to sell as many books as possible because their motive is profit, and they want to change lives too. But that what's good for the goose is good for the gander, and I want as many men to have this book as possible too, so that we can make as many disciples as possible. And everything I just said is true. But, when I would do good, evil is right there with me. And so I know that I also am hoping that the book will be successful so that I might win a little worship. I wonder if Moses felt like that. I wonder if Moses, when he killed the Egyptian, was hoping that the people would adore him for that and turn to him and recognize that God had sent him to be the deliverer of his people. I'm sure he did. You know why I'm sure he did? Because I know that's what I would have done. And I know that's what most men do in that particular phase of their journey. And so, from a worldview perspective, if what God is doing is He's taking us through this humbling process to fundamentally change the way we think. Here's one thing you want to take away from today, you may want to take away from today, and that is never trust your motives. If you find that you ever think that you have gotten to a point where, okay, all that other stuff is behind me now, you are in serious trouble, brother. You are in serious trouble, brother. Now, that doesn't mean that your motives are not mostly pure. In fact, they might be pure in every way towards a particular issue that you have. But you just need to understand that as soon as you lock in on the idea that your motives are pure, you have just left a door wide, you flung a door wide open for the devil to come, the flesh to come and to war with you. God makes men by taking us through a humbling process that fundamentally just changes the way we think. And this humbling process takes place in the wilderness, in character college. And so if you're in character college, or when you're in character college, one of the messages out of this should be that don't resist it. Don't resist it. I've taught here for years that whenever you find yourself in the middle of a hard time, never ask God to remove the hard time. Instead, ask Him that you would learn every lesson that He has for you during that hard time. Why? Because if you don't, you'll have to go that way again. If you try to short circuit what God is doing in your life, then He's going to have to bring a crisis of a different sort, a wilderness experience of a different sort, a frustration of a different sort, a failure of a different sort, because He has something that He wants to build into your life to fundamentally change the way you think, and this is how He does it. Everybody knows, every man in this room knows is that you know that your growth has been so much more profound when you've had to be utterly dependent upon God because you had no props in the world. And that's why God takes us through these humbling processes, because He wants to fundamentally change the way we think. But then we get to graduation day. And how sweet it is. So, chapter 7, verse 30, after 40 years, an angel appeared to Moses in the flames of a burning bush in the desert near Mount Sinai. When he saw this, he was amazed at the sight. He went over to look more closely, and he heard the Lord's voice. I am the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, present tense, the God of your Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Moses trembled with fear and did not dare look up. That's where Numbers 12:3 comes in, that Moses was the most humble man on earth, the most humble man who had ever lived. That's what happened to him in the wilderness. The humbling process. He had been humbled. Then God said, take off your sandals. You're on holy ground. I have indeed seen the oppression of my people in Egypt. I have heard their groaning and have come down to set them free. Now come, I will send you back to Egypt. Okay, now I'm going to send you. And here's another thing to remember, that God is operating in, He's not operating in temporal time. He's not operating in earth time. God's operating in what? Bible time. God's operating in Bible time. We operate in earth time. God operates in Bible time. With the Lord, a day is like 1,000 years, and 1,000 years is like a day. And so God is operating in Bible. How long have these Israelites been in slavery? 400 years. 400 years. How long has Moses been in the wilderness? 40 years. And so God says, I've heard their prayers. Excuse me? I mean, how long does it take for a prayer to get from here to heaven, you know? And so God is just doing things around you and in you and through you that are shrouded in mystery. You can't explain this. God shrouds himself in mysteries. Now, the things that have been made plain for us to see are plainly known, Deuteronomy 29:29. But the secret things belong to God. He shrouds himself in mystery. We don't know what this was about. Verse 33, this is the same Moses they had rejected with the words, who made you ruler and judge? He was sent. There it is again. He was sent. He was sent to be their ruler and deliverer by God himself. God did send Moses to be the deliverer of his people. It was just on a 40-year time delay. And that is very likely the explanation for what's going on in your life too. Not necessarily the only explanation. But God has given us this story, this epic story in the Bible, so we could understand this powerful principle of how God works in our lives. This idea that he makes us through this humbling process just to fundamentally change the way we think. God is more interested in your character than your circumstances. He is. That doesn't mean that God is not interested in your circumstances. He's extremely interested in your circumstances. But he's never going to sacrifice your character just to give you what you want. He's never going to sacrifice your character just to give you what he wants you to have. He wanted Moses to be the deliverer, but he wanted even more Moses to have the character. He didn't want to give Moses the success of delivering the people and then have him fail as a person. And he doesn't want that for you and me either. And so, in the meantime, remember this. He is the principal of character school. He's the principal. You're the student. He is the principal of personal transformation. This principle of personal transformation, of making us, by taking us through this humbling process that alters the way that we think and what we do. Second thing in the meantime, remember who you are. You are a son of the Most High God. You are a co-heir with Jesus Christ. You are a friend of Jesus. I no longer call you servants, he said, because a servant doesn't know his master's business. Instead, I call you friends because I have told you everything the Father told me. I have loved you with an everlasting love. This is how God showed his love among us. He sent his one and only Son into the world that through him we might have life. This is love, not that we love God, but that he loved us and gave his Son as an atoning sacrifice for our sins. So remember who you are. You are in Christ. And whatever's happening to you, you might have a really ragged job history, and you might look like a loser out in the world. But remember who you are. You are a son of the Most High God. You may have had your self-confidence shattered because of your work experience or something that's going on in your family. You just can't seem to get your family to work right. It just isn't working. You have irritable children. You have a wife who's maybe she's like a dripping faucet, the Proverbs talks about. Remember who you are. Remember who you are. And then third, be faithful to do the thing that lies ahead of you. God does his best work when we do our best work. Yeah? And so, whatever stage you find yourself in, The one thing you can do, well, I've already talked about two things. The third thing you can do is you can be faithful wherever God has put you in whatever stage you're in. And because that is what he has for you right now. And so, I mean, if you find yourself in the middle of a bankruptcy, be faithful in the middle of a bankruptcy. You see? Because that's the thing that God has for you right now. So the thing that he has for you right now is the humbling process. The victory comes. The victory will be there. But the victory for God is not something that happens at the end of the humbling process. It's what happens in the humbling process when you faithfully are the man of God that he wants you to be in that position. So don't ever try to get out of the hard time. Just be faithful in the hard time to do the thing that he wants you to do during the hard time. Again, don't try to get out of it, or you're just going to have to relearn the lesson later. The big idea today, God makes men by taking us through a humbling process that fundamentally changes the way we think, helps us to understand who we are, what he wants us to do, changes our motives, so that instead of wanting to do something great just to get a reward, to get praised, to be appreciated, to be recognized, to get the money out of the deal, that all those things will come, but they come as a reward from God, not as something that we did in our own flesh in order to get the same things. People will appreciate you if you do something to change the world, which may be, for example, to maybe the greatest thing you ever will do in your life will to be a cycle breaker in your family. That will change the world. And you will be appreciated for it. You will be recognized for it. But you will be recognized for it because God has done it. Because God has done it. The big idea, God makes us by taking us through this humbling process that changes the way we think. Let's pray. Our dearest Father, Lord, we come to you humbly today. Because we've been humbled. We've been in this humbling process, all of us. And Lord, I pray that you would help each and every one of us to recognize that you take us through this humbling process because you want to transform our lives. You want to change us. You want to change our character. You want us to graduate. You want us to get an A. And so, Father, I pray that you would give us this sense of the patience of Job, this sense of the humility of Moses, the faith that we saw in Abraham and the perseverance that we saw in Joseph, that you would give us these things so that we might fully become the men that you created us to be, and that you will make us, God, into men who experience the power of God being released in every detail and direction of our lives, and that you would be glorified in our lives. And everybody said, amen.